Exodus because it has all the hallmarks of a fantastic adventure. When you first open up Exodus here, the Israelites are, I think, in a tight spot is a good way to put it. And that spot is getting tighter. The noose is kind of coming around them. The amount of oppression that they are enduring is increasing and about to get worse and worse. And if you've read through Genesis to come to this point, which is the logical way of getting there, you have watched God over and over and over swoop in and make everything okay. You've seen him call out Abraham, and you've seen him deal with Isaac, and you've seen him do this and this and this, all the way to the end where we get Joseph and that lengthy story. And every chapter in Joseph, you're wow, this is it. This is it. He's in trouble. He's in trouble. But you know that God is going to deal with it. God's going to come in at just the right God moment and deal with the problem. Then you turn the page in Exodus. Oh, wow, okay, God's got everything under control. And yet his people are still being oppressed. And you know, because you've read this before, that there's even more difficulty and challenge and oppression coming. And so God's plan, you're looking for God's plan, and God's plan is Moses, right? God's plan is a baby. If it were me, right, I probably wouldn't go for the baby, but God says, oh, no, I got this all under control. This baby who should be dead, let's put this baby in a basket and let's push it out into the river at just the right moment to where the current is going to take that basket down, and just the right person is going to pick up that basket, and just the right person is going to deal with this, and just the right person is going to deal with this. And so God's handiwork is all over this. When the Israelites are being oppressed, and God says, Moses, you need to get the people and go. Just go tell Pharaoh you're leaving. I'm sure he'll be perfectly cool with it. And there's a little back and forth between Moses and Pharaoh. I don't know what's up with Pharaoh. He's a little stubborn. I think that would be a fair description. He's a little stubborn because all of his workforce is about to exit. He said, no, that's not going to work. So, they go back and forth with the different miracles, the different signs, the different horrors that come out of the sky. And Moses just repeatedly goes back and says, you got to let these people go or it's going to get worse. And Pharaoh hardens his heart, says, there's no worse. Go ahead, bring it on. Until finally that invitation to bring it on proves to be too much for him. And they're released. See, we knew God was going to take care of this thing. We knew that God would swoop in. And so what does he do? God says, no. I know you're tempted. You want to go take the easy route. You want to get on that trail that's just going to run you around to the promised land. I would prefer that you go across the desert. Go across the desert. Head out this way. So, of course, all of Israel is trucking across the desert, running, because they know that death is following behind them. Running, until where they get? Right to the edge of the ocean. Here they are, standing with their toes in the water. They know that freedom and life and everything that they want is on the other side of that ocean. They can't see the other side of that ocean, but they know that what they want is over there. And everything they don't want is coming up hard behind them. So this is God's idea of rescuing his people. Let me get them out of this so I can put them in an even more difficult position. Now, he gets them out to this water, and it's right there that I imagine a little bit of doubt begins to creep into their mind. They've got their toes dipped in the water. It's probably a little cool. And they're saying, well, I can swim probably that far, and then that's it. All the while, they're thinking about this, behind them, Pharaoh and his army and everything are coming up, they're flying. God says, I got this under control. They're looking at the water. The waves are lapping up. There's no way to go this way. There's no way to go this way. There's nothing. And Pharaoh is right here. His army is right here. Death is right behind him. And God says, relax. I got this. I got this. Put yourself there. Put yourself with your toes in the water. Sure death is coming up right behind you. The end of everything. You escaped one oppression, you escaped one horror, and God leads you right here to the edge of the ocean to die. Because you can see death right there. I mean, bring it into your own life. You've been standing with your feet on the edge of the ocean. You look out and you know somewhere out there, somewhere on the other side of that ocean that's in front of you, there's life. There's the solution to your problem. Everything's fixed. Everything's perfect. But it's over there. And all my problems are piling up behind me back here. And God says, just wait. Just wait. I think that's the hardest moment, isn't it? That is the hardest moment when God says, just be cool. I got this. All signs point to him not having it, right? Ocean, death coming up behind you, no way to go this way, no way. All signs, all your senses, everything you can see, feel, smell, everything says, okay, this is the one. You said you had it, but I'm sorry. Maybe you got off the map or something, or whatever it is. And then right at the right moment, right when death is right there, the sea opens up. And all those who waited that 1 minute, all those who waited, their feet in the water, knowing this is it, knowing this is the final moment, all of them look out, see the water separate. God says, I told you I had it. I told you I had it. Why do you doubt me? Why do you doubt me when you have seen the history of our interaction, Israel and Yahweh? You've seen what I've done for your people throughout history. You have seen that at just the right moment, every single time I have come through for you. No matter what you're facing, Pharaoh's army could be right there with their sword right there at your neck. And I would come through for you. So we've got that part of Exodus, that part of the story. Wow. I mean, your heart's beating when you're reading that. That is pretty cool. I can't wait to turn the page. And then you turn the page, and the focus shifts. Now, all of a sudden, in minute detail, God is saying, this is how it's going to be between us. He gives the 10 Commandments, these overarching principles of how we will interact with Him and we will interact with one another. He says, these are the principles by which you will continue to be my people. You will treat me as God. I am your God. There is no other. And you will hold me above all things. And you will treat one another as the valued people of God that I tell you that they are. Okay? Now that should be enough. But God is not satisfied with that. Page after page after page of detail. You will build a tabernacle. And the curtains will be made of this exact color. And the cloth will be this thick. And you will weave it in this way. And it will have this many rings spaced this far apart. And you will do this exactly. And then he begins to describe the furnishings. You will build for me this. And it will be shaped like this. And it will look like this. You may not do, artistic interpretation here. You will do exactly what I tell you to do. Page after page after page after page. This is how I am to be worshipped. This is the furnishing of the tabernacle. This is the color. This is the exact length of the curtains. This is how far everything is spaced. Everything, down to the most minute detail. The God who just days before had left his people standing here with their toes in the water, certain that they were about to die, now he gets into this just intense detail, this incredible detail. He didn't just say, make me a tabernacle, throw some curtains around it, get a little gold thing, and we're good. No, the God who says, I have this under control. The God who says, I told you I'll be there, and I'll be there, is the same God that is intimately woven into every part of life. He's not just, make me a tabernacle. No, make me a tabernacle this big and this tall, with this kind of cloth, and worship me in this way, with these furnishings, with this thought, with this action. This is a God who not only says, at your worst moment, at your absolute worst moment, when you are standing there with your feet in the water, no place to turn, no place to run, no other hope, and all your problems, death coming up behind you, this is the same God who is intimately involved in every tiny little aspect of your life. That's a big God. We take that and we bring that to bear in the book of Acts. Because some big changes are about to come about for the church, this little young church. Let's turn to chapter 8 this week. You remember that Stephen has been stoned to death. Stephen is the first martyr. And at the very end of that, almost like Luke just thought of it at the last minute, he says, and Saul approved of their killing him. And we know who Saul is. In another chapter, he's going to become Paul. But if this was all we had, Saul is approving of Stephen's murder. Fine, get rid of him. Saul hated the church. Saul hated this new church. He hated what God was doing because it was usurping everything that he valued. Temple worship, Judaism, all of these things. Saul would have nothing to do with those, with anything that disrupted those things. And so he is on a murderous rampage to rid the church of as much as possible. So we have Saul in action, but all that Saul ignites, everything that he gets moving and exciting, begins to rest or visit this persecution upon the church. The little church is just as happy as can be. Just quiet, going about their worship, going about their lives in community together in Jerusalem. Happy as can be. But that's not what they were intended to do. They were to move from Jerusalem to Judea and Samaria and to all the lands beyond. So persecution comes. Persecution comes, and the little church is pushed out into the world. On that day, this is 8:1-2, on that day, a great persecution broke out against the church in Jerusalem, and all except the apostles were scattered throughout Judea and Samaria. Godly men buried Stephen and mourned deeply for him, but Saul began to destroy the church. Going from house to house, he dragged off both men and women and put them in prison. Underline the word scattered in there. Because we're looking for God. We're saying, why would God let his church be persecuted? You can't even imagine that, can you? A church being persecuted. You as an individual Christian being persecuted. I know it boggles the mind. But here it is in the Bible. God is allowing the church to be persecuted. Even more so, he's allowing Saul to be the chief persecutor. You say, wow. But the word that we can easily read by there is scattered. The word in Greek is diaspora. Diaspora is not a scattering willy-nilly. Like you just take something and throw it and wherever it lands is where it lands. Diaspora, the idea of scattering in that word is like a farmer would scatter their seed. The farmer's very carefully going to scatter their seed. He's not going to intentionally throw it out in the street. He's not going to intentionally throw it over here where there's no water. He's going to very carefully scatter it where he knows that it's going to do the most good, where it's going to be able to germinate and live and grow and bear fruit. And that's what God's doing with his church. He's moving them out of the comfort of Jerusalem. And if he's going to use persecution, that's what he chooses to use. He's going to use this persecution to push them out. And the first place that they end up is the first place that they were ordered to go by their Lord. Judea and Samaria. And why is Samaria such a big deal? Samaria is a huge deal because it is going to be the first people, the first non-Israelite people to receive the gospel. It's going to be the first non-Jews to receive the gospel. And when they go to Samaria, they're dealing with a group of people who have some idea of what Judaism is about. They have some notion of what God is about because they have this poorly formed semi-Judaism faith thing. The only thing they held on to was the Pentateuch. And so they built their whole faith around the first 5 books of the Bible. So that's their idea of God. So it's very legalistic. It's very culturally bound. And now somebody comes along and says, I have a Messiah for you. I have the one that you've been waiting for, the one that you've been looking for. He came. He was here. He has promised you the freedom that you've been waiting for. Remember, these are people who are despised by Jews. These are half-breeds, to be polite. These are people who the Jews looked at and, oh, no, I'm not having anything to do with that. Remember Jesus and the woman at the well? Remember the good Samaritan? You've heard these things before, okay? It's those guys. And so Philip goes out and he shares the gospel with them. He shares the gospel with them, and they are overwhelmed because now the truth is real to them. Now they can see God on the move. They can see the truth being presented to them, and they're saved. I mean, it's an awesome thing. They're shrieking, and bad spirits are coming out of them, and there's great joy because of the salvation that's coming into their land. They are open and ready to receive the gospel. And then Simon the sorcerer, looks in and says, well, I like a little bit of that. Now here's Simon who has made his living doing this kind of powerful stuff, or giving the appearance of doing this kind of powerful stuff. He's been a big man in this area. He's been an important guy because of whatever power it is that he has. But now he sees the power of the gospel. Now he sees what Philip is doing by simply preaching and sharing the reality of the gospel. When he sees that, he says, well, I want a little bit of that to add to my magic kit here. So it says he's saved. It says that he believes and was baptized. Go a little further in the story, you find that not to be true. You find that he has a malformed faith. He has come to the gospel and believed in the gospel for the wrong reasons. He has taken a hold of the gospel for the goodies. He has taken a hold of the gospel for the power that he thinks he's going to receive. He's grabbed a hold of that and he's believed in that. But if we had asked Simon, hey Simon, would you sing the song with me? Would you give your life at the cross, Simon? Simon would say, well, I don't want any of that. I want the power. I want the good stuff. I don't want the bad stuff. Well, he's confronted about that later on in the story. He's confronted because he tries to buy the power. He tries to consume the power. He looks at the power of the gospel and says, I could buy a little bit of that. I could make some of that my own. And of course, he's cursed for doing that. He's cursed, and it appears that he becomes repentant in here, but it's difficult to tell for sure. It appears that he is repentant, asks for prayer for himself. And then we have this other group. So much going on with this move. We have this other group who's been saved, but has never received the Holy Spirit. The Bible's not clear about why the Spirit didn't come upon these people. It's possible that they didn't believe, they intellectually, the Bible's not clear on this. We're not going to speculate about what it is. But when they come, and the apostles come and review their faith, they say, you need the Spirit. You need the Spirit to be a complete Christian. So they deliver the Spirit. They call for the Spirit to come into these guys. So we've got the Samaritans being saved. We have some who have the Spirit, some who not have the Spirit. We have Simon doing his tricks. We have Simon trying to buy the power. We have Simon being saved, appearing to be repentant. There's so much going on here. And we're tempted once again to say, God has lost control. God has clearly lost control of what's going on in here. He has moved his church out of town. He has moved his church into what seems to be an inviting area for the gospel. And then all this chaos is going on. This faith is not properly formed. These people have not fully believed. This guy is trying to believe for the wrong reasons. This is going on. This is going on. This is going on. And we're tempted to say, okay, finally we found where God he slipped up. Now we know that's not true because we know the rest of the story. But it's in the midst of something like this, in the midst of this kind of chaos, that we start to think back to the people standing with their toes in the water. Okay, God, where are you? Where are you? I need you now. I need out of this problem now. I need this trouble fixed now. I cannot wait. I cannot wait. And God says, just relax. Relax. I've got this under control. I know it looks chaotic. I've got this under control. I know that the church is being persecuted, that people are being injured and hurt. I've got this under control. I know you see some people have the Spirit, some people don't have the Spirit. I know that you're seeing this. I know you're seeing all this. I've got this under control. I've got this under control. We bank on that promise of God having everything under control, don't we? We bank on that. We live in that promise. We do nothing. We go up and down this chapter. We see all this chaos. See all this chaos and say, I don't get it. I don't get it. This doesn't make sense to me. Why would God release his people from their bondage in Egypt only to run them out to the edge of the ocean where they were surely going to die? Why would God do that? To show that he was God. To show for certain that he was God and that he alone had delivered his people. Why would he allow his church to be persecuted? He wants his church to expand. Well, his church is going to expand for sure. To the ends of the world. to Paul, Idaho. But God elects to use persecution to start that effort. I read this, and I get the same feelings I get when I read Exodus. God is always and forever and completely in control. I read this, the story of the young church. And far from being this kind of dry, dusty bit of church history, what I see is all these interlocking parts, this over here, this down here, and they're all moving together, they're all locked together. And even though it seems chaotic, even though it seems like God has lost control of this, I know, if I can just read one more page, if I just continue to read one more page, that I will see how this all comes together, how everything gets explained. And just like the Hebrews who stood there with their toes in the ocean at the edge of the Red Sea, certain that they were about to die. And just as the persecuted church looks back at Stephen and says, well, this is it. If we have to give up our life, we're giving it up for the gospel. Surely, this is the end of the young church. And then God says, I'm here. I've got this under control. Man, how many times have you and I been in that same spot? Huh? Our backs up against the wall. No place to go. Our foot, one foot over the edge of the cliff. And no way to back up. Trouble creeping up behind us. And maybe not even creeping up behind us. Trouble screaming up behind us. And we are absolutely sure, we are positive that this is it. This is the time. That's the trouble that's going to do me in. This is the problem that I'm not going to be able to deal with. This is it. God has said, I've taken you as far as I can. And yet, we read Exodus, we read Acts, we go into the detail of Leviticus and Numbers. We go into that and we say, well, but we have a God. We have a God who is so familiar with the tiniest aspect of my life. And He knows that I'm here with my back to the wall. And I know He'll do something about it. Our challenge is really simple. It's simply to hang on for one more minute. It's simply to hang on for 1 minute past the time in which you think you can't handle it anymore. When your foot is over the edge of the cliff and you are teetering about off, you need to hang on 1 more minute. When your problems threaten to consume you, when everything has finally overwhelmed you, and you cannot take one more thing, God says, hang on 1 more minute. Trust me for 1 more minute. And it may be that all we see is ocean. And maybe we look out, we look this way, we look that way, we look in front of us, and all we see is ocean. I mean, picture that in your mind. You have been at the ocean, and you have looked out, and there it is. There it is. As far as you can see, as far as you can imagine, as far as you can picture on a map, the ocean. And you know that life and safety and security and everything that you're yearning for is just on the other side of that ocean. Just on the other side of that ocean. And the waves are lapping at your feet. The waves are threatening to consume you. Because if you've been at the ocean, you know those waves get bigger and bigger and bigger. And the tide comes in. And you're standing there and you're going, God, everything is coming up behind me. Everything is threatening to consume me. I'm going to die here. And you've brought me to the edge of the ocean. And God says, 1 more minute. Hang on 1 more minute. And we go, why? Why, God? Why do I have to hang on 1 more minute? And God says, just like everybody else, I'm going to come at just the perfect moment so that there will be no doubt that it was God that saved you. There will be no doubt that as you waited for that final moment, and everybody around you looked at you and said, well, that's the end of that person. This problem's going to get him. At the end of that 1 minute, God is going to come in, and there will be no question as to who saved you, as to who fixed your problem. Our job is simply to hang on. To hang on for that one more minute, that crucible, that 1,000-degree crucible of life. And we're in there and we're just about to be consumed. And we hang on. We hang on for one more minute. And God quenches the fires. God takes the heat away. And we come out the other side. We come out the other side purified. We come out the other side different from who we were when we went in. We come out different, more confident, more understanding of the God who saves, the God who delivers, and the God who is intimately knowledgeable about every aspect of our life. There is no trouble that you have. There is no trouble, no problem that can possibly come into your life that God does not already understand and already have a solution for. But as we go through that crucible, as we come out the other side, and sometimes we come out the other side singed and smoking and a little bit charred. And we say, God, why? Why? I hung on for that minute. I hung on as long as you commanded me to hang on. I did that, God. I did that because you told me to. And you made me go through the fire. And you brought me out the other side. But I'm burned. I'm disfigured. And just like the persecution of the church. Just like God running Israel up to the edge of the ocean. Just like every other instance in the Bible where God takes his people right to the edge. And maybe they get a little burned in the process. But coming out the other side, there's always a purpose for the gospel in us coming out the other side. And when we hang on, and when we go through that, and when we get changed, we are a more powerful object, a more powerful vessel for God to use in sharing the gospel. One of the great things that we get from reading the Bible over and over and over, it's not a book we read once and then put away. We read it over and over and over and over throughout the whole of our lives. We do that because every time we turn these pages, we go up and down these stories, we encounter these stories of people who came before us. People who came through the crucible. People who stood with their feet in the sea with no hope. We see these stories and we say, gosh, if God worked that way in that situation, if God changed these lives in this way, if God fulfilled his promise in this way, then it's up to me to open my eyes and see all the possible ways that God could be answering my problem. You know, it's possible. It is completely possible that when we are there, backs to the wall, thinking that there's absolutely no hope, and all we see is the ocean in front of us, that God has already answered and addressed our problem. And we just have not become aware enough to see that answer. It's possible that God has already been at work for years. That person that you're praying for, that loved one, that son, that daughter, that parent, that friend, whatever it is, you've been praying over and over and over and over. God, do something, do something, do something. And as we become more and more experienced with God and his interaction with his people, God might be tempted to lean down and whisper, I have been doing something. I have been doing something. I've been transforming your life so that they will see your life. I walked you through the fire so that when you come out smoking and charred on the other side, they will believe. God is intimately involved in every aspect of our lives. Every bit of it. We take for granted that God decided in his wisdom to use persecution to move his people out of Jerusalem. And because we know the end of the story, we say, makes perfect sense to me. And you and I face the same kind of thing in our life. We face this struggle and we say, this is the one that has escaped God's attention. Go back to Exodus. Go back to Genesis. Go back to Acts. Go back to any book in the Bible. And say, has God ever let his people down? Has he ever not used something to bring him glory? Has he ever not addressed a problem? It may be that you and I will not see the answer to our problems. It may be that God calls us to endure, to hang on for that one more minute, and be called home, and then the answer comes as a result of our life. It may be that we see the answer tomorrow. Either way, God commands us to do one thing, and that's to hang on 1 minute more. Let's pray.